Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So today I want to talk about the ancient weapon Uranus. And so guys, this is something that will comprise many of my older theories and thoughts on Uranus, but I was recently reminded of the topic and I really want to combine this with another popular idea out there which I think fits very well in with this and basically completes the theory. I think the majority of people are going to like this regardless of whether or not they believe that it'll actually be the case. But without further ado, let's get into it. And so guys, I want to start here, which is that dragons are a real thing in the world of One Piece. They once existed or still exist somewhere in the world. Now guys, this is partially confirmed from the one-shot monsters which Oda wrote before he wrote One Piece and has tied nicely in with the story of One Piece with the character Ryuma. Essentially in the story of monsters, the original character Ryuma, while he was still alive, killed a dragon. Ryuma then appears in the story of One Piece as a zombie, hailing from the country of Wano, and thus these two stories are combined. The two universes then become the same thing, and dragons and the time of Ryuma actually existed. And this was actually confirmed in SBS volume 47. But I don't think that you needed this correlation to confirm that dragons actually existed at some point in time or still continue to exist in the world of One Piece, because we have the world government and Vegapunk's a really just strong desire to create dragons and dragon related things. Vegapunk spent a lot of time and effort in creating artificial dragons in Punk Hazard. He also created an artificial devil fruit which gave the consumer of that artificial devil fruit a dragon mythical zone sort of zone dragon powers. But just as a heads up, I will actually try and convince you otherwise for this second point later on in the video, but as it appears on the surface, and what most people believe is that Momonosuke has a dragon fruit that was created by Vegapunk. So Vegapunk created a devil fruit related to dragons. He tried to recreate artificial dragons. The world government and Vegapunk clearly care a lot about dragons. And so guys, I think it's very interesting to look at what exactly the world government is interested in sort of acquiring, the powers that they do not have that they desire. I believe all of these things will be important or were important at some point in the story of One Piece. You can start off with the obvious one, which is the world government's desire to be able to recreate devil fruit. Devil fruits are some of the strongest things that exist within the world of One Piece, and to be able to recreate their powers and produce them, mass produce them at your command is something that would make the world government even more unstoppable than they already are. And I believe it also tells us that the world government, or the people that founded the world government, were not responsible for the creation, the original creation of the devil fruits. As of right now, there's nothing that would really suggest that they would have lost the ability to create them if they were the ones to originally create them. They're the ones who won the Void Century. They won that war, and there's no reason that that ability should have been taken from them. And so with that being established, then somebody else created devil fruits, or devil fruits previously existed and were sort of created naturally or by some even more ancient group before the world government became a thing. So with this being the case, then you can clearly see the greed of the world government. They saw something in the world which granted someone power and tried to create this power for themselves. I think this is a very important way to think about it, because doing so adds greater importance to the other things that the world government is interested in recreating. And here I'm going to go back to dragons. For the world government to prioritize so highly the recreation of dragons suggests that they are aware of the great power that dragons have or had. There's really no other explanation for why they would devote so much time and money to the idea of trying to recreate them. But another thing that I find really interesting is that they actually did recreate dragons, because we saw artificial dragons on Punk Hazard, but they abandoned those dragons as though they were failures. And so by itself, it doesn't seem like they're failures. They look like dragons, they breathe fire, they have a decent amount of strength, obviously not compared to the Straw Hat crew post time skip, but still if you made enough of them, they would present some challenge to and a greater additional force to the world government. So why exactly is this not enough for them? Well, I think that my answer to this is that the real dragon, the ancient dragon which actually existed in the world of One Piece, was so much stronger. But going back to the dragon in Monsters, that dragon seems to be more of the type that essentially Vegapunk recreated. And so it would seem to put a cap on just how strong a dragon could be. But there's a possibility that there were many different types of dragons as well that once existed, and perhaps that type of dragon was not exactly the type of dragon that the world government really wanted. But anyway, let's go back into the world government's interest, because their interest is a very exclusive list. We have recreation of devil fruits, clearly overpowered. We have, they want the ancient weapons. Ancient weapons, definitely overpowered. They want to be able to master the science of giantification. Giants as a group of people, the lower tier giants, are many times greater than the average human. And so if you made all of your soldiers giants, you increase your fighting power by many hundreds of times if you can do this repeatedly. Again, just extremely overpowered. And then you have the creation of dragons, which seems to be, at the very least, a very odd inclusion on this list based on what we 100% know about the dragons that existed in One Piece. But for them to be included, I believe that they must be of a similar level to everything that I listed before them, thus making dragons as well potentially extremely overpowered. And so now let's get into the ancient weapon Uranus. And so we don't know anything about Uranus except what we can speculate. But what we can speculate creates many interesting stories. And so I want to start off with this, which is that we know of two of the ancient weapons. We know of Poseidon and we know of Pluton. And so the god Poseidon from Greek mythology was a ruler of the sea. And the ancient weapon Poseidon from the story of One Piece, Shirahoshi, actually can control the Sea Kings, and she can order them to do as she wishes because she is essentially the king of the Sea Kings. And then so we have the ancient weapon Pluton, which is a warship capable of destroying islands, potentially even the world. And then we have the Pluton, or Pluton from Greek mythology, or also known as Hades in Greek mythology, which is the god of the underworld or god of death. So you have this ship which can create death, and you have a death god. The gods and the ancient weapons in a way coincide. And then we have the ancient weapon Uranus, which is actually extremely interesting because the previous ancient weapons were named after the traditionally well-known Greek gods such as Poseidon and Hades and or Pluton. But Oda did not choose to make the third ancient weapon Zeus, which, if you'll know, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades were all brothers. Rather, the third ancient weapon is Uranus. And Uranus is essentially the grandfather of these two other Greek gods. Uranus was the father of the Titans, and from the Titans spawned Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. And so, from this perspective, you could make the argument that Uranus may potentially be the strongest ancient weapon. Or if not the strongest, perhaps the most historical. Because in Greek mythology, we have Mother Earth, and Mother Earth's son was Uranus, as well as Mother Earth's husband, as well was Uranus. We're talking about a real OG god here. And so Uranus was the personification of the sky. And so if the trend holds with the relation of the ancient weapons to their actual names, their Greek god names, or their god names, then Uranus, the ancient weapon, should have something to do with the sky. Dragons have something to do with the sky. Is the world government and Vegapunk so interested in recreating dragons because a dragon, or the dragons as a whole, comprise the ancient weapon Uranus? Then I want to go back to this point that Oda specifically chose not to name this third ancient weapon Zeus. Although Zeus as well is the personification of the sky. He is this sky god. So thematically there would be no reason to choose Uranus over Zeus when you have previously named the other two ancient weapons after Zeus's brothers. And so my answer to this is that the difference between Zeus and Uranus, the main difference, is that Uranus was in fact the more ancient version of the sky god. So perhaps the actual Uranus, the ancient weapon itself, is actually a more ancient type thing than the other two ancient weapons. And so if Uranus was indeed a dragon, for me this would make a ton of sense. Dragons then would be sort of the most ancient creature of the earth itself. And Oda may have hinted this by giving the name of this ancient weapon, if they were in fact dragons, the more ancient god. And so guys, before I move on, I need to say this, which is that with Uranus being the personification of the sky, many people assume that the actual ancient weapon Uranus will have sky-related powers, and many people point to the possibility that it can actually control the weather. And this is what spawned the ever so popular ideas that Monkey D. Dragon is actually Uranus, because it is hinted that he has control over the weather. But I'm going to be straight with you guys, I do not believe that Monkey D. Dragon is the ancient weapon Uranus, nor do I believe that his powers specifically allow him to control the weather, quote unquote. I believe that Monkey D. Dragon has the wind Logia Devil Fruit, which he can use scientifically with scientific applications in order to artificially change the weather. But I do not think that he has a Devil Fruit or a power which specifically gives him command over the weather itself. I'm not going to try to argue this at all, just justifying why I do not believe it, so that you can be more prepared for why I believe this idea. And so this is where I want to get into the part that is definitely not my theory. All this other stuff is, a lot of it is just common knowledge at this point in time. Things that are very on the surface and obvious based on names. And so guys, I'm unsure if many people said this at the same time, or if this was specifically from this person. I feel like I heard it in a couple different versions, but I can't exactly point my finger, so I will just credit this person. But if you know of any other theories that may have predated this, then let me know. But this was created by Goldie Usopp of Oro Jackson, and essentially he drew our attention to the Dragon King in Chinese mythology. And there are two things that I find incredibly interesting about the Dragon Kings. The first of which is that they had the power to control the weather. Alright, and so this already ties in with our sort of guess as to what the powers of Uranus could be like, so this fits. The other thing that I find interesting is that the Dragon Kings were known to shapeshift between their dragon form and their human form. And so this is where I'll get into Momonosuke. And so as many of you may know, if you followed my channel for a while, you'll know that I believe that Momonosuke is actually the ancient weapon Uranus. And the reason that I believe this more than any other reason is because he has a very mysterious power, which on the surface appears to be completely overpowered. It's at the ancient weapon level. He can command Zunisha, and if he can command any other creature other than Zunisha, then that would essentially make him a awesome counterpart to Poseidon, and Poseidon being an ancient weapon should put Momonosuke's power at that level. And guys, there's like a ton of other reasons, but I don't want to drag this video on, so I will include a link in the description to my very old theory in which I argued that Momonosuke is Uranus, and I should really update that with my current thoughts to perhaps better argue it, but that video will have to come sometime in the future, if at all. You can also check out Drittz the theorist, newer video on the topic as well, and he argues it as well in his video. It will also be in the description. And so now guys, many of you may be thinking, well, okay, Joy Boy, you cannot believe in this idea that a dragon is the ancient weapon Uranus with some sort of weather control powers, and at the same time believe Momonosuke is Uranus while having some sort of power to control creatures. These are not the same thing, so you got to choose one. And to that I'll respond, how about we combine them? This was a video that I did sometime in the past, and at the time when I did it, I honestly believed that it was probably the most crazy video I had made on my channel at that point in time, as far as being just on that next level of tinfoil hatness. However, the more that time has gone by and the more that I think about it, the more I actually believe it. This video was called The Secret Within the Egg, and again it will be in the description if you want a more in-depth look at pretty much what I'm about to say, because I will skim over many details for the sake of time. But this idea is pretty simple, but crazy. Momonosuke is actually a dragon, specifically a dragon king who was hatched from the egg on Goldie Roger's ship. Now, as many of you may know, there has been a lot of theories that Uranus is actually the egg on Goldie Roger's ship. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's just this mysterious egg that is on his ship, which has not been explained or emphasized in any way, and pretty much must be important. We also learned from Shiki that Roger had found an ancient weapon, and the only thing that we see on his ship that could possibly be an ancient weapon is this random ass egg. And we do not know what happened to the egg. And so I believe that the egg hatched, and the product of this hatching was Momonosuke. That Roger actually gave this egg to Odin to protect, keeping in mind that Odin Kozuki was actually a member of Roger's crew, and thus Odin was entrusted with Momonosuke. But I bet many of you who are not familiar with this theory are probably scratching your heads at this point in time, thinking to yourself, yo bro, Momonosuke is not a dragon, he's a human who ate Vegapunk's failed artificial devil fruit, which turned him into a dragon. But is this the truth or not? I think it's very interesting that it's specifically noted that Vegapunk's devil fruit was noted as a failed devil fruit. Yet, Momonosuke, after having eaten the devil fruit, for the most part, has received mythical zone dragon type abilities. Now, he cannot control it very well, and that may in fact be its weakness, but at the same time, he has zone powers. He can produce clouds, which is the mythical zone aspect of the devil fruit. I would not call this a failure. In fact, when compared to the Smile Devil Fruit, this is significantly improved, and the Smile Devil Fruit is not noted as a failure. So I'm wondering if this artificial devil fruit that Vegapunk created actually did anything to Momonosuke whatsoever. Perhaps we are being misled by Oda to think that the artificial devil fruit gave Momonosuke the ability to transform into a dragon, but perhaps Momonosuke has always had the ability to transform into a dragon. Basically, Momonosuke is a shapeshifter. He has a human form and he has a dragon form, similar to the mythology of the Chinese Dragon King. It's also interesting to note that Momonosuke's dragon is specifically a Chinese dragon. And it doesn't even stop here, because the very first time that Momonosuke got a character box explaining who he is, and he's gotten 3 of them in total, the first one was Momonosuke Dragon. But the thing that really ties all this together and provides the main reason why I believe that it is possible is the line from Momonosuke at the end of the Zou arc, where essentially people were talking about Roger, and Momonosuke chimes in, being basically saying, oh yes, Roger, I think I remember him. And if you know the Momonosuke's age and when Roger died, you know that this makes no sense. Roger died 22 or 24 years ago. Momonosuke is 8 years old. Why did he say this? Is it possible that Momonosuke was indeed inside the egg on Goldie Roger's ship, and in some way vaguely remembers his time spent with the Roger pirates and Goldie Roger himself? Oda could very well be being a sly bastard right now. Anyway guys, I know that this thought is crazy, and requires a lot of things to be true for it to be true, and thus may reduce the likelihood that it is actually true. But at the very least, I think this is probably the most awesome theory that I've ever been a part of making. There's so many awesome ideas thrown into this one idea. Many of the most popular ideas as to what Uranus is are in some way intertwined with this particular idea, and I just wanted to give you guys an update on my thoughts on the topic. I could spend 30 minutes to an hour trying to properly convince you with everything that I've got that this is true, but ain't nobody got time for that. So I hope that this is enough to at least wet your tongue to the idea, and maybe look more into the topic and check out my older videos. But anyway guys, let me know what you think. Subscribe if you want to be notified for my future videos, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.